Hi everyone, welcome back to SGDA Summit Day 2 Student Games Showcase Block D. We're here with Neon Navigator from Cal Poly Pomona. I'm Jason, SGDA's president.
And this is Megna. I am the marketing lead for SGDA. And we're about here to play Neon Navigator with the Neon Navigator team and starting off Showcase D. So first off, as Jason, or I don't know, as Jason begins playing the game, would you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. I'm Keshav. I was the team lead on this project, and I guess I can also introduce the others. There's also Jason. He was my secondary team lead because we had development split into two teams, and I also have Alex, who did a lot of the music work on the project.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and I also helped with testing because we'd hang out in the computer lab before class, and he'd just hand me his laptop and be like, "Try this out."
Yeah.
Nice.
You'll have to
Okay.
forgive me for playing a little bit poorly today.
No worries. Okay, so I guess are there any team members that aren't here currently, or is this the entire team?
It seems one of us won't be able to make it, so this should be it for now.
Okay, sounds good. And so how did this game get started and where did you get the idea from?
Well, the game got started because last spring semester I decided I wanted to participate a lot more as I was nearly into the computer science major. So I decided to join the game development club. That's the day they were announcing that they will let people choose a game idea and to present it. So I'm like, it's a fun project. I haven't had any experience such as this, so might as well try it. And it was basically an inspiration from an old mobile game I played where there were these separated platforms, and you'd essentially build a bridge to get across, and the bridge could be of any length. So I decided, using that as a basis, I could design a game where you have to build a bridge to get from one point to another. And that was the basic idea that started this game.
Awesome. And then I guess as for the game itself, how did each part of the game come to be and what's the story behind creating each section of the game? Since I noticed like in between like certain colors have different or like certain levels have different things going on.
Mm-hmm. The first part was really just getting the mechanics down. We were all new with Unity. That was the game engine that we were using. So it was first learning about Unity, how all of its systems work. So I decided a fun project would be to split the dev team into two, where one worked on getting the mechanics down in one way, while my team, we were going to get the whole pathing system created, where a player can create a path that follows them around. And that's how we learned a lot of the basics. And getting that part done was extremely difficult for us because it required a lot of testing, first of all, and then there were a lot of bugs to fix. And then came, I suppose, the artwork on what type of theme we wanted to explore. Originally, I wanted to go for a more medieval-like theme, but I was recommended.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was thinking it'd be like a knight infiltrating a castle. You have the special sword to build the pots, but I was recommended maybe I could explore more 2.5D type style in a Tron-like version, because Tron also has the whole motorcycles creating the pots behind them. And then I did the art. Getting the artwork up was quite a little bit hard because it had to do with a lot of lighting systems and renderings that, of course, we didn't know at the time. So that was another layer of testing. And so each part was basically an incremental development where we started out with a core concept and wanted to fully flesh that out before we approach yet another task, because it would take a lot of resources from us and time to get that working.
Yeah, awesome. And I guess it's just like a little follow-up question. Did I guess did you guys make most of the assets in the game, or is like some of them from the asset store? Or
The biggest thing from the asset stores, I suppose, would just be the background pictures,
Mhm.
because I just found search of Neon Factory essentially and found some nice looking pictures and basically applied some light editing on them to apply as background. For the menu, we use things like an AI art generator because we found that to be the best use of our time by the time we got to creating a background art for the menu.
Yeah,
But otherwise,
I spent like a whole afternoon on Stable Diffusion just rendering images because I had to render like the background city and then also like the character, and then I had to like crop out the character and like turn it into a silhouette and then paste it onto the city and then like re-render using that image as a reference. So
Mhm.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
and a lot of the concept art was also we just used AI to like generate concepts before we
Yeah.
tried to iterate them in the game.
Mhm. Yeah, beyond that, most of the assets were our development, but as you can see, a lot of it's just basic gears or blocks that light up.
Gotcha. But it still looks like what is it? It still feels really cohesive in terms of even like, using simple shapes to create like a dynamic environment.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. And then I guess another question for you and your team, what was the most difficult part of development?
For starting out, for me, it was coordinating with quite a bit of a large team. It was 8 members total, and delegating tasks, depending on the various skill levels, was a bit difficult. That's why I was taught, as I was saying earlier, I split into 2 teams. So where one team who had more time, could focus on development, the other team could learn some of the other skills needed for everybody to be caught up to a certain level.
Mhm.
And then beyond that, the most difficult part, I suppose, was putting our concept down on paper. We had a concept, we had plans, but implementing those within the game, such as getting the art done, was a bit more of a pain than I would like to admit at this point.
Yeah. No, I think like definitely if especially if we don't have like a dedicated art team, it's really hard. Sometimes it like gets a little hard to manage all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess another kind of question that we have that we have listed is how long have you guys been working on this game?
We started around February or like late January, early February, right after the game presentations were done, as people started to join the team. We did not that much work leading up to it's supposed the midterm spring break period, but right as the deadline started to approach, a lot of us were pulling multiple hour shifts trying to get multiple parts of the game working. Alex here worked on the music samples that we had originally done out quite a bit, to just because I was very demanding on the type of tempo to fit the levels. And then for development, getting the levels designed was quite hard, because in a game where you're giving the player this much freedom, you have to design the levels carefully so that much freedom doesn't actually make the gameplay boring. So that required a lot of iterations. So that's an extra amount of time. Through that we were quite compressed at the end, but we managed to get through a product that I think we're somewhat satisfied with. There are definitely some elements I would like to include.
Yeah, and
Definitely.
just to also add a little bit to the difficulty of that, like what Keyshawn said earlier, part of that difficulty towards the end was combining both of the work of our teams together, because we had initially split off into 2 teams to get the fundamentals down, but it was getting close to the wire to the point where we had to actually integrate both of our works together. So that was a bit of a challenge as well.
Yeah, we definitely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, at one point we had to like scrap a system a whole another team had developed because it didn't integrate well with existing systems, and that hurt quite a bit because a lot of time was spent into making that.
Wow, yeah. So I guess like because it was kind of almost two different sides of the game that you kind of had to like put together.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
understand. It's like hard. It's really
Yeah.
like it is rough. But I'm
Yeah,
glad
because
oh,
oh,
sorry,
sorry.
continue.
I know you go first. You go first.
Oh, I was gonna say I'm glad you guys pulled through with that.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say like the issue was because initially we were split between two like gameplay concepts that we weren't sure which one we wanted to do, so we split into 2 teams to so we could maybe like iterate like a bare bones version of both, so we could see which one played better. But then the problem was like we didn't really go back and combine our works until like very close to the deadline.
Hmm.
Gotcha. And then yeah, I guess like especially like with on a timeline too. Like it makes sense the way that you guys did it because if you have like a short amount of time, it's better to have two teams, especially if you like kind of are trying to figure out what system that you wanted to use. But yeah.
Yeah.
I guess for in generals I guess like I'm kind of curious to hear more about how the two different systems were working, since one of our questions that we have is like how did the game change over time in terms of like the original idea, or say like the way that you guys did it where you had two different teams. So I guess like how did that work?
So the original idea was quite simple. It's a basic level. You could think of it like the plot was you escape with a portal-like gun, and then you build pods and you get from one part of the level to the other. And it was kind of a mix where you're both traversing a level and solving the puzzles. But we realized like trying to get that concept, it's quite difficult. So I had the idea to split it. So one team worked on the puzzle sections. You can see those categorized as testing labs, odd numbers in the board side at the start of the levels. And then there were the more fast runnings, where the player character is moving quite fast, and you're basically fighting against a camera to get from point A to point B. That auto scroller came in quite late, as I realized just allowing the player to travel very quickly made the gameplay quite boring, because the player could just travel from one end to the screen to the other, and now they have to just wait for the camera to catch up. It doesn't provide too much of a challenge in terms of that. And then this allowed one team to progress. This allowed this independence team to progress at their own rate, because I realized if I tried to get both the concepts through this one direction, we sometimes would have to play catch up for the other team to get up to a certain level, or we would have to fast forward, and it didn't allow for that good of a development pace for either of the team members.
Got it. Thank you for explaining. Okay, I guess like the kind of second to last question, but what part of the game are you guys most proud of, like for each team member here?
For me, I'd say it's just getting the mechanics down. The path building works properly, and it's fluid, because our earlier iterations were much more curvy, to say the least, because you were essentially building a line with a dot following you, and it was a bit jank from our earlier development versions. Then just getting it to measure correctly with the player's positions required a lot more math than I thought it originally would. So I'm quite proud of getting that part down.
I guess for me, I'm most proud of like the art and music. That's just mostly because that's what I worked on the most over the course of the project.
Yeah, mine would be the puzzle sections that we had. So like the various tutorials, because those were actually like we broke it down from our original puzzle level to have like each, I guess, puzzle component be its own tutorial. And so just seeing all those implementations come to life is what I'm really proud of.
Awesome. And I guess kind of close to final questions, but do you guys have plans on the game's future development? Like, are you planning on developing it further um, in terms of, I guess, like improving it or adding more content?
Currently, like what we originally planned is like have a big break over the summer, because we were all pretty tired from the development. But there are some plans if we do choose to iterate on it further. It's like finally include the character model, because by the end of the project we had a fully working animated character model, and like 2-3 hours before the presentation, yeah, close to 1 hour really, I got the model while in the school library, finally working within the game. But at that point I had to roll back, because it was just a bit too late to properly have it ready for the presentations that I had to rush to after that. But beyond this is just having more refined transitions between these levels, because it's the UI and the overall feel of the game still gives up a little bit of that unpolished sense, because it's not fully iterated upon. You can see that it was mainly the levels that were worked upon, and not how they stitched together, or is there a more defining theme traveling throughout them. So focusing on this more the polish. I would love to do that before adding things like enemies, extra themes, and etc.
Awesome. I feel like it'd be really interesting with enemies, especially
Yeah.
since it kind of speeds up in some parts.
Mhm.
Okay, well, we're kind of close to the 15-minute mark, but if you guys have any more, guys, I wanted to shout anything out, whether that be your socials, LinkedIn, or if you have a Twitter game or a Twitter page for the game, things like that.
I don't have anything in particular to shout out, but I do want to shout out my team. I'd say my biggest contribution to this project was mainly just I could develop. I had enough skills within that so I can bring concepts to life in the game. But managing the team took quite a bit more work. And so help like Alex here was, I'd say, a secondary producer to me. He helped facilitate a lot of the conversations within other team members to know what everybody was up to. Because at some point, just knowing what each part of the team was doing was hard and didn't allow for proper planning. And then Jason helped with resources such as GitHub, managing repositories and keeping everything flowing. And I also like to thank like some of the artists that did work on the game, producing logos and such to give our game more feel, more polish. It was great.
So, do the other team members want to shout anything out, or?
Yeah.
I feel like Keshav kind of undersells what he was doing because he programmed the entire game for like the first 2/3 of the semester by himself, and yeah.
Dang. Okay. Good job.
But yeah, just sorry, I was the person streaming and playing the game, so don't let my gameplay sort of be the denominator of how good the game is. It's just my unfortunate learning the game on the fly. So play the game for yourself.
Yeah, and some stuff from the chat is our officer has commented that this game is really hard.
It definitely is. From our
yeah.
perspective, it's not that much, but it would be because we're experienced with the mechanics. Because of that, we did purposely have to include a kill button when the player traps themselves in essentially a box of pots. But it's a lot about the practice. That's why we do have the tutorial levels, gives a feel of how the gameplay actually works. But yes, I could definitely do much better with telling people how the game properly is played.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
this
then
guy Pride, he played through the game so many times while debugging, he can play it expertly with a trackpad, which is crazy.
Oh, I can't even imagine with a trackpad. I already had a problem with the mouse. And then another person also said that the platforming reminded them a lot of the time mastering movement in Assassin's Creed. Yeah.
I'd say yeah, that could be it. And also like you could see some of the level inspirations are taken from games like Geometry Dash.
Yeah, I
Because
definitely was kind of reminded about that when it came to like the actual level design. Yeah. Oh, okay. So we're coming up on our time. So if you guys want to say anything else, feel free to do so. We do have like a little bit more. We have a little bit of leeway since there's only one other game in the slot. Yeah. If you guys have anything else to say, you can say it now.
maybe I'd just give some tips on playing the game. It's all in the position of your player. So it's like think of where your player is and where your mouse is, and that's how the bot's gonna be built. Beyond that, I can't really say much beyond play it a little.
Yeah, it's all about the practice.
Yeah, exactly. And also
Yeah.
not boxing yourself, because that does happen quite a bit.
Okay, I guess so thank you to the Neon Navigator team for coming out for the showcase stream today. And next up will be Never Home Hall of Apathy. So we'll see you guys in about 10 minutes-ish.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you
Thank you.
for coming.
Yeah.